The galaxy trembled as the last remnants of humanity's fleet limped home. Earth had once been a hub of life, a cradle of civilization, but that was before the war that changed everything. The alien alliance that had once claimed to be allies, peacekeepers in the vastness of space, had brought humanity to its knees. Their technological superiority had obliterated Earth's defenses within months. Colonies had fallen, cities turned to ash, and hope, like a flickering star in the distance, had nearly died. Admiral Cassandra Riggs stood at the helm of the Legacy, the last of the warships capable of deep space travel. The crew aboard her was a ragtag mix of survivors, scientists, soldiers, and civilians, all bound together by a singular purpose: survival. But survival was no longer enough. The time for escape, for running, had passed. "What's our status, Lieutenant?" Riggs asked, her voice low but commanding as she paced the dimly lit bridge. "Still no sign of the enemy fleet, ma'am," Lieutenant Wallace responded, his face drawn with fatigue. "But we've barely got enough fuel to reach the edge of the veil. We'll need a miracle to make it to the outer systems." Riggs nodded. The veil was a region of space shrouded by ion storms and uncharted nebulae, a place even the invaders dared not enter. It was humanity's last refuge, a broken boundary where they could regroup and, perhaps, find a way to fight back. "We won't need a miracle," Riggs said, her eyes narrowing as the stars outside the ship's viewport seemed to swirl. "We'll make our own." The ship's captain had always been a woman of action, a relentless force of nature. She was a survivor, a leader, and a strategist who had spent the last few months biding her time, analyzing every weakness of their enemies. And now, with the knowledge that humanity had only one final chance, she felt a shift within her, a sense of purpose, of revenge that transcended the survival instinct. "We've spent too long being the hunted," Riggs continued. "Now it's our turn to hunt." Her voice carried across the bridge, resonating with the crew like a spark that could ignite a fire. Wallace looked at her, then glanced at the others. They had heard the rumors, the whispers of ancient technology buried beneath the rubble of their destroyed colonies. It was said that before humanity was brought to the brink of extinction, their ancestors had left behind a legacy, a blueprint for a new kind of weapon, one that could change the balance of power. A weapon that could turn the tide of war. But that weapon had been lost to time, hidden away, far from the prying eyes of the alien alliance. Only a few knew of its existence, and fewer still had the skills to decipher its mysteries. "I'll need the coordinates to the old research stations," Riggs said, breaking the silence. "The ones buried on Mars. If there's any hope of finding this weapon, that's where we'll begin." Wallace's eyes widened. "Mars? That place is a ghost world now. The invaders have taken it for their own. The surface is crawling with their soldiers." Riggs smiled, a slow, confident grin. "Then we'll make it a ghost world again." It was risky. The aliens were everywhere, and they had established heavy fortifications on Mars, turning its red soil into a fortress. But Riggs had always been a believer in the impossible. She'd seen humanity survive against the odds before. And if the weapon existed, if there was even a chance it could be salvaged, she would risk everything to get it. "Prepare the crew," she ordered. "We leave in 1 hour. No one gets left behind." As the crew scrambled to ready the Legacy for the next phase of their journey, Riggs stood before the bridge's main viewport. She saw only the dark expanse of space, the cold nothingness that stretched endlessly before them. But in that nothingness, she saw something else. She saw the promise of revenge. The war, as far as she was concerned, wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And if humanity was to be remembered, it would not be as the victims. No, they would be remembered as the terraformers, the ones who reshaped the universe in their image. The Legacy emerged from the dense ion clouds that had hidden them from the alien fleet, the flickering stars now casting an eerie light across the vast, empty stretch of space. In the distance, Mars loomed like a cold, desolate monument to humanity's fall. Once a thriving hub of scientific research and pioneering spirit, it had been reduced to a barren wasteland under the invaders' control. Admiral Riggs stood at the tactical console, her fingers hovering over the holographic map of Mars. The planet's surface was a maze of alien structures and military bases. The once vibrant cities had crumbled, and what remained was a fortress of dark metal and concrete, guarded by a relentless enemy force. Approaching Mars in 10 minutes, Wallace's voice broke through the silence, snapping Riggs from her thoughts. "Understood," she said, her tone steady. "Prep the team. We're going in." The crew moved with precision, a well-oiled machine despite the odds stacked against them. Every person on board knew the stakes. They weren't just going to retrieve an ancient weapon. They were going to take back their planet's legacy, the very thing that had once defined humanity's strength and ingenuity. Riggs addressed her team in the briefing room, a group of hardened veterans who had lived through the worst of the war. Among them was Dr. Evelyn Voss, a leading scientist in terraforming technologies, and Captain Yarrick Steele, a former Special Forces operative with a reputation for surviving the impossible. "We're going in hot," Riggs began, her voice sharp. "The invaders have a stronghold at Olympus Mons, but our intel suggests that the weapon we need is buried beneath the ruins of the old research facility at Hellas Basin. It won't be easy. Mars is crawling with their forces, and we'll have to fight our way through." She met each of their eyes. "But I believe in this team. I believe in humanity's ability to overcome. We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting for revenge. For our future." The team exchanged determined nods, the weight of their mission settling in. They all understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about salvaging an ancient weapon, it was about rekindling the spark of resistance, about proving that humanity could stand tall once more. With that, the team suited up, the clattering of armor and the hum of weapons filling the corridors of the Legacy. Riggs and her crew were ready to face whatever the aliens threw at them. The descent into Mars' atmosphere was harrowing. The invaders had deployed anti-air defenses across the planet's surface, and the Legacy was forced to dodge laser fire and missile strikes as it plunged toward the planet below. Riggs gripped the armrests of her chair, her heart pounding in her chest, but her face remained unreadable. "Hold steady," Wallace barked as the ship shuddered under the impact of enemy fire. The drop pod launchers were activated, and the team descended into the crimson skies of Mars, plummeting toward their destination. The planet's landscape, once a symbol of humanity's ambition, now looked like a nightmare, a fractured world of craters, twisted metal, and alien monstrosities. The landing was rough. The drop pods slammed into the Martian surface with a deafening crash, sending a plume of red dust into the air. As the hatch opened, the team quickly disembarked, weapons raised, scanning the barren landscape. The horizon was a series of jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the barren plain. "Stay sharp," Riggs ordered, her voice like steel. "We're not alone." The air was thin, the gravity weaker than Earth's, but every step felt heavier, as if the planet itself was resisting their presence. The team advanced cautiously, moving toward the ruins of Hellas Basin. The once bustling research facility was now little more than a broken skeleton, half buried beneath the dust of centuries. Alien banners hung from the decaying structures, a grim reminder of who controlled the planet now. "We need to find the entrance to the vault," Dr. Voss said, her voice tinged with excitement despite the danger. "It's located beneath the central lab complex. If we can get past their defenses, we might be able to access the weapon." As they approached the entrance, the ground trembled. Riggs' instincts screamed a warning, and she signaled for the team to take cover. From the shadows emerged the alien soldiers, tall, sleek beings with dark, reflective armor that shimmered like oil on water. Their elongated forms were imposing, their weapons humming with deadly energy. The time for subtlety was over. "Engage!" Riggs shouted. The firefight erupted in a chaotic frenzy. Gunfire lit up the dark Martian sky as the team fought with precision and desperation. Steele led the charge, moving like a ghost through the ruins, his assault rifle tearing into the alien ranks. Meanwhile, Dr. Voss provided cover fire, her specialized weaponry designed to disrupt the alien technology. Riggs herself was a blur of motion, cutting through the enemy with deadly efficiency. The aliens may have had superior technology, but they were not prepared for the sheer ferocity of humanity's will to survive. Every shot fired, every alien fallen, was a small victory, a symbol of the revenge humanity sought. As the last alien soldier fell, the team stood victorious, breathless but alive. The entrance to the vault lay just ahead, waiting. But Riggs knew that this was only the beginning. The true battle had yet to come. The air inside the ancient research facility was stagnant, thick with dust and the smell of decay. The walls, once gleaming with cutting-edge technology, were now cracked and worn, their surfaces scarred by years of neglect and the ravages of war. Admiral Riggs led the way, her boots echoing on the cold metal floor as she approached the massive reinforced door at the center of the central lab complex. A series of symbols, long faded, were etched into the door's surface. Riggs knew that these markings were once part of a security system designed to protect the secrets hidden within. But to her, they were just a challenge, one that she would soon overcome. "Dr. Voss, can you make sense of this?" Riggs asked, motioning to the ancient symbols. Dr. Evelyn Voss stepped forward, her fingers tracing the patterns on the door. Her brow furrowed as she muttered under her breath, deciphering the markings. "It's a hybrid code," Voss said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Ancient Earth technology mixed with an alien language. It's a puzzle, but I think I can unlock it." "Make it fast," Riggs urged. "We don't know how much time we have before they send reinforcements." Voss nodded and produced a small handheld device from her belt. She connected it to the control panel next to the door, and with a few precise taps, the device emitted a soft hum. Sparks flew from the panel as the system came online. "Almost there," Voss said, her fingers flying over the controls. "Got it." With a loud mechanical groan, the massive doors slowly began to slide open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The room was dimly lit, the air inside thick with age and mystery. But as the door fully opened, the team's breath caught in their throats. Inside was the vault, a place long forgotten by the galaxy at large, but one that held the key to humanity's vengeance. Rows upon rows of ancient technology lined the walls, their forms unlike anything Riggs had ever seen. But at the far end of the chamber, atop a pedestal, was a large, glowing object. It pulsed with a faint, eerie light, a weapon unlike any other. "That's it," Dr. Voss said, her voice barely a whisper. "That's what we've been looking for." Riggs' heart raced. The weapon, the key to humanity's revenge, was within their grasp. But as they stepped closer, a low, rumbling noise echoed through the chamber. Riggs' eyes widened in alarm. "Ambush!" Steele shouted, his voice sharp. The ground beneath them trembled as alien soldiers appeared from hidden alcoves, their sleek armor reflecting the chamber's dim light. The invaders had found them. They were too late in their approach, and now they were surrounded. Riggs immediately assessed the situation, her mind working with the precision of a battle-hardened strategist. They had the weapon, but escaping with it would be no easy task. The vault had been compromised, and the aliens were closing in fast. "Get to the weapon," Riggs ordered. "Voss, Steele, cover us." The firefight erupted with a fury that shook the very foundations of the vault. Riggs and her team moved quickly, but the alien soldiers had the advantage in numbers and positioning. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, narrowly missing them as they advanced toward the pedestal. Steele's heavy weapon roared, cutting down alien soldiers with terrifying efficiency, while Voss, despite the chaos, kept her focus on the glowing object. The weapon was within reach now. Only a few more steps. Riggs sprinted forward, her pulse quickening. She knew that the weapon would give humanity the power to turn the tide of war, but only if they could survive long enough to activate it. Just as she reached the pedestal, an explosion rocked the room. The shockwave sent her flying backwards, slamming into a wall with a bone-jarring thud. Pain radiated through her body, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself back onto her feet. "Riggs!" Steele shouted, fear in his voice. "Get up, we've got to move." Through blurred vision, Riggs saw the weapon pulsing brighter now, its energy surging as though it was reacting to her presence. But the alien soldiers were closing in. They wouldn't let them escape without a fight. Voss! Riggs yelled, her voice hoarse. Activate the weapon. Voss nodded, already moving toward the pedestal. The ancient device thrummed louder, its energy fluctuating like a living thing. But as Voss connected her handheld device to the weapon's control panel, a series of alien words flashed across the screen. It's locked, Voss said, frustration creeping into her voice. I can't access it. It's blocking me. Then we'll make our own way, Riggs snapped. Steel, clear a path. With a growl, Steel unleashed a hail of gunfire, mowing down the advancing aliens. The team was trapped, surrounded on all sides, but Riggs wasn't about to give up. She couldn't afford to. Not now. Not when humanity's future was so close. As the last of the alien soldiers fell, a new presence filled the room, a terrifying figure cloaked in dark energy. It was an alien commander, towering over the remains of the fallen soldiers, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Humans, the commander's voice boomed, echoing through the chamber. You seek to take what is mine. You do not understand the power you tamper with. You cannot hope to wield it. Riggs steadied herself, her mind racing. This was no mere soldier. The invaders had sent their leader to stop them. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady and resolute. We're not tampering with it. We're going to use it to take back what's ours. With that, she drew her sidearm and fired, the shot ringing out with deadly precision. The fight for humanity's future had just become even more dangerous. Be anything but easy. The room seemed to pulse with an energy of its own as Riggs and her team faced the alien commander. His presence was overwhelming, an aura of power and malevolence radiated from his every movement. His dark armor glinted under the vault's dim lights, and his eyes, glowing with a cold, predatory light, locked onto Riggs with a gaze that sent a chill down her spine. You dare defy us? The commander's voice reverberated through the chamber, as though the walls themselves were shaking with his anger. You will pay the price for your insolence. Riggs tightened her grip on her sidearm, her instincts screaming at her to keep fighting, to never give up. But she knew this was no ordinary battle. This wasn't just about survival, it was a test of humanity's very will to rise again. We'll see about that, she said, her voice hard, unyielding. The commander's lips curled into a cruel smile, and he raised his hand, signaling for his forces to close in. But as they moved, something unexpected happened. The glowing weapon on the pedestal began to hum, its energy building with every passing second. The ground trembled beneath their feet as though the weapon was awakening from a long slumber. The air around it grew dense, heavy with the kind of power that seemed both ancient and alive. Dr. Voss, eyes wide with awe, looked at the weapon. It's activating itself. What do you mean, activating? Riggs asked, her mind racing as she took a step back. I think, Voss said breathlessly, that it's responding to us. To our presence. It's trying to connect with us. Riggs barely had time to process the implications of Voss's words before the alien commander lunged. With lightning speed, he crossed the room, his energy blade crackling with deadly intent. But before he could strike, the weapon flared to life. A burst of radiant energy shot from the pedestal, and a shield of blinding light enveloped Riggs and her team, forcing the alien forces back. The commander stumbled, his glowing eyes narrowing in disbelief. No, he hissed, as the light seemed to push him away, like a powerful force field. He raised his hand to shield his face, but the brilliance was too overwhelming. This is impossible, the commander snarled, retreating a few steps, visibly rattled. This technology, it should not exist. The team was momentarily shielded by the powerful energy field, but Riggs knew this wouldn't last forever. They had mere moments before the aliens regrouped. The shield would only hold for so long. Voss, do you have control of it? Riggs shouted over the hum of the weapon's activation. I don't think I need to, Voss replied, eyes glued to the glowing device. It's choosing us. The weapon's energy intensified, and a series of holographic images flickered to life in the air before them, ancient symbols and complex schematics projected into the space above the pedestal. It was a blueprint, a map of sorts, one that detailed a network of technologies, including hidden systems and vast, untapped power sources scattered across the galaxy. The invaders had no idea what they were up against. The true nature of the weapon was not simply destructive, it was transformative. "It's terraforming technology," Dr. Voss said, awestruck. "This weapon can reshape entire worlds. It's not just a tool of war. It's a tool for revival, of restoration." Riggs's mind raced. This was more than just revenge. This was the key to humanity's resurrection, a weapon that could reshape the galaxy, turning it from a place of conquest and destruction into one of rebirth. With this, they could take back what was lost, not just in Earth's remnants, but in every world that had been subjugated by the alien invaders. "We can use this," Riggs said, her voice hardening with resolve. "We can take back Earth. We can take back everything." As the weapon's energy continued to rise, the alien commander growled in frustration, his eyes darting between the holographic projections and Riggs. "You fool! You do not understand the forces you are meddling with. The galaxy is not yours to reshape." Riggs squared her shoulders, meeting the commander's burning gaze. "We'll do what we must to survive. Humanity isn't here to be subjugated." The alien's posture shifted, and he raised his hand toward the weapon, attempting to disrupt the flow of energy. But the shield flared again, blasting him back several meters. He hit the wall with a violent thud, his body twitching as he struggled to regain his footing. "Time's up," Riggs shouted, turning to her team. "We need to move now." The alien forces were beginning to regroup, but with the weapon's energy now fully awakened, they had the advantage. Riggs turned to Steele, who was already preparing the evacuation plan. "Get to the exit. We don't have much time before they come for us with everything they've got." Voss looked back at the weapon one last time. "We need to take it with us. It's the key to everything." "We don't have the luxury of time," Riggs said firmly. "We'll return for it later. Right now, we need to survive." With a final glance at the weapon, the team made their way toward the exit, the blast doors sliding open as the alien commander, his rage palpable, tried to rally his troops. "You won't escape this," the commander yelled, his voice full of venom. "The galaxy will burn for this betrayal." But as the team rushed into the tunnels below the facility, Riggs held her head high. They had the weapon's power, and they had something even more dangerous: hope. The underground tunnels beneath the research facility echoed with the hurried footsteps of Riggs and her team as they raced to escape the alien stronghold. The sound of distant alien shouts and the rhythmic pounding of armored boots growing louder with every passing second reminded them that time was running out. They had secured the weapon, but the alien forces weren't going to let them leave so easily. "Keep moving," Riggs shouted, her voice steady despite the tension. "We need to reach the extraction point before they seal the facility." "Steele, take point." Captain Steele nodded and advanced ahead, his rifle held high, scanning every corner for any signs of movement. His years of combat experience had made him the ideal leader for situations like this, and it showed in the calm precision with which he moved. The others followed close behind, their weapons raised and eyes alert, but Riggs knew they were running out of time. The weapon's energy signature still hummed in the back of her mind, a constant reminder of the untapped power they had just unearthed. The holographic blueprints had shown more than just the potential to terraform planets, they hinted at the ability to create massive energy fields, manipulate gravity, and even alter the fundamental laws of nature on a localized scale. If humanity could unlock even a fraction of the weapon's potential, they could turn the tide of the war against the invaders. But first, they had to survive long enough to get back to their ship. The tunnel system seemed endless. Their journey through the catacombs was fraught with danger, alien patrols on every level, automated defense systems activating as they moved deeper into the facility. Each turn brought new obstacles, but Riggs and her team were relentless, pushing forward with determination. "They've sealed off the primary exits," Dr. Voss said, her voice tight with anxiety. We'll have to take the secondary tunnel system if we want to make it out. Lead the way, Voss, Riggs said, not hesitating for a second. We don't have the luxury of choosing. As they navigated through the twisting labyrinth of tunnels, the distant hum of the facility's reactors grew louder. The deep vibrations of the base hinted at something far more catastrophic, something the aliens were preparing. Riggs had a sinking feeling in her gut that the invaders were preparing for their final strike, launching an all-out assault to ensure that no one would leave the planet alive. We need to hurry, Riggs said, her voice urgent. If they're preparing to fire on the surface, we won't have much time to get clear. I've got eyes on the secondary exit, Steele reported, his voice low and sharp as he scanned ahead. We're almost there. But just as hope seemed within reach, an explosion rocked the tunnel. The force of the blast sent Riggs and her team sprawling to the ground. Debris fell from the ceiling, and the tunnel's lights flickered wildly, casting long, shifting shadows. Report! Riggs shouted, struggling to get to her feet as the others did the same. I'm good, Steele grunted, pushing himself up. Voss? I'm fine, Voss said, but her voice had a tremor. That explosion came from above. The ceiling's weakening. Riggs looked up at the crumbling structure above them, and her worst fears were confirmed. The tunnel system was beginning to collapse, and the alien forces were closing in, their presence now felt in every vibrating tremor beneath their feet. We're running out of time, Riggs said, her tone grave. We have to fight our way to the surface. Steele, get us out of here. Voss, get ready to use that device if we need to. Dr. Voss nodded, clutching the small, modified tablet that had allowed her to interface with the weapon earlier. The device had become their lifeline, and its potential to disable or destroy alien tech was their best chance at survival. They continued forward, cutting through the wreckage and debris that threatened to trap them. Riggs could feel the tension building with each step. The stakes had never been higher. Incoming! Steele barked, his voice filled with urgency. A blast of energy shot through the smoke-filled air, and the team was forced to dive for cover as alien drones appeared in the tunnel, their weapons charging. The team fought with everything they had. Steele's rifle cracked with deadly precision as he took down drone after drone, while Riggs and the others provided covering fire. They were skilled, but the aliens had numbers, and they weren't afraid to use them. The sound of plasma bolts ripping through the air filled the tunnels, the heat of the blasts just missing their targets. But Riggs could feel something shift in the air. The weapon they had secured, it was responding again. It wasn't just a tool, it was a force. She could feel it calling to her, a surge of energy deep within her bones. Voss! Riggs shouted above the chaos. Can you access it now? Voss's fingers flew over her device, her face strained with concentration. It's interfacing with me. The power, it's more than just a weapon. It's a network. I think I can use it to disable their drones. Do it. Riggs commanded. With a final, desperate press of a button, Voss initiated the command. The weapon's energy surged once more, and the drones in the tunnel began to spark and malfunction. One by one, they fell to the ground, their systems fried by the overwhelming energy released from the device. We've got a window! Steele shouted. Let's move! But as the last drone fell, a new force entered the battlefield. The alien commander, his armor scorched and battle-worn, emerged from the shadows. His eyes burned with fury as he locked onto Riggs. You think you can take what's mine? The commander's voice was thick with venom. You are nothing but insects beneath my heel. Riggs stepped forward, her eyes cold and defiant. We're more than you think. With a snarl, the commander raised his blade, charging straight for Riggs. But she didn't back down. With the weapon's energy still pulsing around them, she felt something shift within her, an overwhelming surge of power, a primal instinct to survive. In that moment, the world around her seemed to slow. Without hesitation, she aimed her sidearm at the commander and fired. The blast struck true, hitting him square in the chest. The force of the shot sent him crashing to the ground, the energy field around his body flickering and sparking. The commander's body twitched, but then, nothing. He was down. Riggs exhaled sharply, her body tense but victorious. Let's get out of here. Now. With the commander defeated, the team finally made their way to the surface, the secondary tunnel now clear of enemies. The ground above was still burning from the earlier bombardment, but they had made it. The ship was waiting for them in the distance. As the team boarded the Legacy and launched into the sky, Riggs couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning. The weapon was now theirs, but so was the responsibility of wielding it. And with it, humanity's revenge had only just begun. The Legacy cruised through the void, the cold expanse of space stretching endlessly before them. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense but triumphant. Riggs stood at the bridge, her fingers gripping the railing as the stars drifted past in silent oblivion. The weapon, secured in a reinforced containment chamber, hummed softly, a constant reminder of the power they now wielded. The team had survived the aliens' ambush, but the victory felt hollow, for Riggs knew that much more was at stake than just this single weapon. How much longer before we reach the rendezvous point? Riggs asked, breaking the silence. 2 hours, Steele replied from the helm, his eyes scanning the star charts ahead. We should be in the clear, unless the aliens are already tracking us. We need to get there fast, Riggs said, her voice clipped with urgency. The last thing we need is for them to learn about the weapon's true potential before we can use it. Behind her, Dr. Voss was busy poring over the data they had retrieved from the vault. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she flicked through holographic images of the weapon's design and function. Riggs, Voss said, her voice steady but full of disbelief. I've been going over the schematics, and there's something I missed earlier. The weapon's power isn't just focused on terraforming, it's linked to an ancient network. The technology is older than anything I've ever seen, even older than the alien invaders themselves. Riggs turned, eyes narrowing. Older than the aliens? How is that possible? Voss shook her head, her expression a mix of awe and confusion. I think this weapon was created by a species that predates all known civilizations. There's no record of them in any of the archives, but the energy signatures are similar to patterns found in the oldest ruins we've studied on Earth. Whoever built this weapon had control over entire systems of worlds, possibly galaxies. Why would they leave something like this behind? Steele asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. Voss paused, her eyes flicking back to the holograms. I don't know yet, but it's clear that this network of power is what the aliens were trying to harness. And it's what we need to stop them. Riggs absorbed the information, her mind racing. The implications were enormous. If humanity could unlock the secrets of this weapon, of this ancient technology, they could not only defeat the aliens but reshape the very balance of power in the galaxy. But what if the weapon had been abandoned for a reason? What if the same power that had once been used to create civilizations could now destroy them? We'll figure that out later, Riggs said, forcing herself to focus. Right now, we have a more immediate problem. The alien commander may be down, but his forces are still out there, and they're going to come for us. We need to be ready for a fight when we reach the rendezvous. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, throwing everyone off balance. The emergency lights flickered briefly before steadying. Riggs's pulse spiked as she immediately rushed to the console. Report, she barked. We've been hit, Steele said, his voice calm despite the chaos. We've entered an asteroid field, an unexpected one. They must have been hiding in the sector. The collision damaged the rear stabilizers, but we're still in one piece. Damn it, Riggs muttered, her gaze flicking to the navigational map. They're trying to trap us. Voss turned to her, a sudden realization in her eyes. The weapon's energy signature, it's changing. The aliens, they've detected us. Riggs cursed under her breath. They know we have it. They know we're here. Steele, get us out of this field. We need to keep our distance. But before Steele could respond, a series of blaring alarms cut through the ship, and the console in front of him flickered. Alien fleet inbound, he said, his voice tight with urgency. They've detected our location and are closing fast. How many? Riggs demanded. Enough to make this escape impossible, Steele replied grimly. I count at least 36 ships, and they're deploying fighters. Riggs's mind raced. They had no choice but to face the alien fleet head-on. They couldn't let the weapon fall into the enemy's hands, not now. Prepare for combat, she ordered. Steele, get us into position. We'll need every advantage we can get. The team braced for what was to come as the alien fleet loomed closer. The Legacy had weapons, but it was no match for the alien armada. Yet, as the tension in the air thickened, something in Riggs's gut told her there was a way to turn the tide. Voss, can you interface with the weapon again? Riggs asked, her voice edged with hope. Is there any chance it can help us now? Voss hesitated, clearly torn. It's possible, but we haven't fully understood how to control it. It's a risk. We don't have the luxury of time, Riggs said firmly. We use it. We fight, and we find a way to win. Voss nodded, though her eyes were filled with uncertainty. She made her way to the weapon's containment chamber, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to interface with it. As she did, the ship's hull groaned in protest, the alien fleet drawing ever closer. We're not going to make it, are we? Steele asked quietly, his eyes narrowing at the readouts. Riggs met his gaze, her expression unreadable. We're going to make it. And if we don't, we'll go down fighting. The Legacy shook again, this time more violently, as alien fighters launched their assault. The hull rang with impacts as the alien ships unleashed devastating firepower. Riggs braced herself for the worst, but then, something changed. Voss's voice came over the comms, her words crackling with static. I've tapped into the weapons network. It's like a surge. It's connecting. I can feel the energy flowing through me. It's more than just destructive power. It's altering the field around us. Riggs turned sharply, eyes widening. What do you mean? Voss's voice was tense. It's like we're part of the system now. I can control the gravitation fields around the fleet. I can manipulate the trajectory of their ships, even their weapons. It's as if we've become a part of the weapons matrix. The alien fighters were closing in, their weapons charging for another strike. But just as the first wave of plasma fire came barreling toward the Legacy, the ship shuddered, this time, not from impact, but from a strange, overwhelming pull in the gravitational field. The alien ships froze in mid-flight, their momentum suddenly halted, like they were caught in an invisible web. Now! Riggs shouted. Open fire! Steele unleashed a barrage of cannons, and the Legacy's weapons tore through the alien fighters, shattering them one by one. The once dominant alien fleet was now in disarray, its ships unable to break free from the gravitational trap Voss had set. For a fleeting moment, Riggs felt the full weight of the weapon's power, and for the first time since they had discovered it, she realized the true scope of what they had uncovered. The tide of the battle had shifted, but the war was far from over. The Legacy surged forward, its engines roaring as the alien fleet, now in disarray, drifted helplessly in the wake of the weapon's gravitational pull. The atmosphere inside the ship was tense but filled with a strange sense of victory. The alien ships that had once seemed so formidable were now floating targets, their systems malfunctioning and weapons useless. Riggs paced the bridge, her mind racing. The battle was won, for now. But she knew this was just a temporary reprieve. The weapon was too powerful, and if the aliens figured out how to neutralize it, all would be lost. How much longer until we're out of their range? Riggs asked, looking over her shoulder at Steele, who was still at the helm. We've got about 5 minutes before they regain control, Steele said, his eyes scanning the readouts. And the rest of the fleet is still incoming. They'll send reinforcements, fast. Riggs nodded, steeling herself for the next fight. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, but don't push the ship too hard. We need to survive long enough to reach the extraction point. Understood, Steele replied, a hint of steel in his voice. Riggs turned toward Voss, who was still at the weapons containment chamber, her hands trembling as she continued to interface with the ancient technology. The glow of the device pulsed in rhythm with her movements, the hum of energy filling the air. How's it going? Riggs asked, her voice calm but with an edge of urgency. Voss glanced up at her, her face pale but resolute. The network is vast, far more complex than I imagined. I've accessed the core systems of the weapon, but it's like trying to communicate with a sentient being. It's learning from me. Responding to my commands. But I'm not sure I fully understand its limits yet. Can it help us in the long term? Riggs pressed. We need to know what it's capable of if we're going to turn the tide permanently. Voss hesitated, her fingers still moving over the controls. It's not just a weapon of destruction. It's a system that's been dormant for eons. I can feel the energy inside it, it's like a reservoir of power, waiting to be tapped. If we can learn to control it fully, we could harness that power to shift the balance of the war. We could even change the course of history itself. Riggs's eyes darkened as she processed the information. And what happens if we can't control it? Voss looked back at her, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. Then it will control us. This power, it's too vast, too unpredictable. We could reshape the universe, or we could destroy ourselves in the process. Riggs's mind flashed to the war-torn world they had just escaped from, to the countless lives lost to the alien invaders. She clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. We don't have the luxury of fear. We fight, and we win, or we die trying. As the tension mounted, the comms crackled to life, cutting through the heavy silence in the control room. Incoming alien fleet, Steele reported, his voice grim. They've reinforced their positions. They're preparing to launch another attack. The ship jolted as an explosion rattled the hull. Alien fighters had broken free from the gravitational trap and were launching a new assault. The Legacy shuddered under the impact as plasma bolts splashed across its shields, but the ship held firm. Voss! Riggs barked. Now would be a good time to give us some backup. Voss's eyes snapped to Riggs, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed her face. I don't know if I can do this. It's like I'm speaking to something ancient, something beyond my understanding. I feel it pulling at me, like it's alive. Riggs took a step toward her, her voice soft but resolute. Voss, you're not alone in this. We're all in this together. We need you to focus. You're the only one who can control it. Voss took a deep breath, her hands hovering over the controls, her fingers trembling. She closed her eyes, drawing in a long, steadying breath. The weapon's energy surged again, its pulse syncing with her heartbeat. Her voice came out in a whisper, almost lost under the hum of the ship's systems. Okay. Let's see what this thing can really do. Suddenly, the entire ship seemed to shift. The gravitational fields around them twisted and warped as the weapon's energy flared to life. The alien fleet's attack faltered as their ship seemed to slow in mid-air, pulled off course by an invisible force. The Legacy surged forward, its weapons charging as it broke free from the assault. I've got control, Voss said, her voice thick with exertion. I can feel it, every ship in the enemy fleet. I can see their movements before they make them. Then let's end this, Riggs said, her voice sharp with purpose. The alien ships fired, but their shots missed, drawn off course by the shifting gravitational field. The Legacy launched into evasive maneuvers, but instead of retreating, Riggs ordered Steel to engage. The ship's weapons fired with deadly precision, tearing into the alien fleet. The tide of the battle had turned. The aliens, now disoriented and vulnerable, couldn't keep up with the Legacy's sudden onslaught. Voss continued to manipulate the gravitational fields, pulling enemy ships into each other's path, disrupting their firepower, and throwing them off balance. The Legacy moved with an eerie grace as it cut through the chaos, its weapons blasting apart the alien ships one by one. But just as Riggs began to feel the weight of victory lift, the alien command ship appeared, its massive form emerging from behind a cluster of asteroids. This ship was unlike any Riggs had seen before. It was heavily armored, its weapons bristling with energy. It was clear this ship had been built for one purpose: to end the threat posed by the Legacy. "That's their flagship," Steele said, his voice tight with apprehension. "It's going to take everything we've got to take it down." Riggs's eyes locked on the incoming behemoth. This was the final test. She could feel the weapon's power coursing through Voss, but the alien flagship was a different beast altogether. The Legacy would have to use every ounce of its newfound power to overcome it. "Voss, can you control the weapon long enough for us to destroy that ship?" Riggs asked, her voice low and intense. Voss's face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. "I'll do everything I can." "Then let's end this," Riggs said. The Legacy locked onto the alien flagship, its weapons primed for one final, decisive strike. The ship's hull shuddered as Voss directed the energy to target the flagship's weak points. For the first time, Riggs allowed herself a moment of hope. This was the moment that could change everything. The Legacy stood poised at the edge of destiny. The alien flagship loomed large ahead, its massive form an intimidating presence against the backdrop of distant stars. The remnants of the alien fleet had scattered, crippled by the weapon's power, but the flagship remained, the final obstacle between humanity and victory. On the bridge, Riggs took one last look at her crew. Steele was at the helm, his eyes focused and unblinking, while Dr. Voss stood at the containment chamber, her hands still twitching from the overwhelming energy coursing through her. Riggs could see the strain in Voss's face. Controlling the weapon was taxing, and they were pushing it to its limits. "Can you hold it together?" Riggs asked, her voice steady but edged with concern. Voss didn't look up, her gaze fixed on the holographic interface as she manipulated the weapon's systems. "I have to. This is the only chance we've got." Riggs nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's make it count." The alien flagship's massive energy cannons were charging. Riggs watched as its shields flickered, preparing to unleash devastating firepower. The Legacy was a formidable ship, but it wasn't invincible. If they didn't act fast, it would be over before they even had a chance. "Steele," Riggs said, "get us in range." No hesitation. "Understood," Steele replied, his voice calm as he adjusted the ship's trajectory. "We'll be in range in 30 seconds. The tension on the bridge was palpable as every crew member held their breath. Voss's fingers flew over the controls, her mind locked into the weapons network, her body drained from the effort of maintaining the connection. She could feel the pulse of energy, the ancient power, like an electrical storm building in her chest. "Riggs, I can feel it," Voss said, her voice strained. "The weapon, it's not just a tool. It's a force. It wants to be used. If I push too hard, I might lose control." "Then don't push too hard," Riggs replied. "But we need everything you've got." The flagship fired. The bolts of energy shot toward the Legacy at blistering speeds, but this time, they didn't hit. The gravitational field surrounding the Legacy twisted and bent, slowing the alien projectiles, making them veer off course and miss the ship entirely. The weapon's power was unimaginable. Voss was bending space itself to protect them. The Legacy fired its weapons in return, but the shots barely made a dent in the flagship's armor. It was like striking an ancient mountain with a hammer. It had the power to break, but it needed more force, more precision. "Voss!" Riggs shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "We need to take that thing down, now." Voss's eyes flickered with intense concentration. "I'm trying, but it's evolving. It's like the weapon is feeding off the energy from the flagship. The more I fight it, the more unstable the whole system becomes." The alien ship's cannons began charging again, faster this time, its weapons brimming with deadly power. Riggs realized they were running out of time. "Steel," Riggs said, her voice cutting through the tension, "turn the ship hard to port. Voss, I need you to find their weak point. Now." Voss closed her eyes for a moment, reaching deep into the weapon's power. She could feel the energy, the potential, but it was elusive. Then, like a flash of insight, the information came to her: the flagship wasn't just an advanced warship. It was a living machine, a blend of organic and synthetic technology. There was a core, a weakness at the center, a pulsating heart hidden beneath the layers of metal and shield. "I found it," Voss said, her voice strained but determined. "There's a core, buried deep in the flagship. If we hit it with full force, we can disable it. But it's going to take everything I have left." Riggs's heart raced. "Do it. We're counting on you." Voss's eyes opened, her face pale as she connected to the weapon for the final time. The ship shuddered as the power surged once more, and Voss's hands flew over the controls. She was channeling all of the weapon's energy, feeding it into a single, concentrated blast aimed at the flagship's core. The Legacy moved into position, its engines thrumming as it aligned for the final strike. The alien flagship fired its weapons again, but this time, it was too late. The Legacy was already in motion, its hull vibrating as the energy pulsed through it. "Now!" Riggs ordered. Voss released the power. A beam of concentrated energy, pure and blinding, shot from the Legacy's weapon banks. The beam cut through the void, streaking toward the heart of the alien flagship. The shot pierced the flagship's shields, then tore into its core, sending shockwaves through the alien vessel. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The flagship's energy systems overloaded, and the ship began to tremble violently as its core destabilized. The Legacy rocked as the shockwave from the explosion hit, but it held firm. Then, in a final, deafening explosion, the alien flagship erupted in a burst of light and fire. The energy from the blast rippled outward, tearing apart the remaining alien ships in its wake. The battlefield was silent, the remnants of the enemy fleet floating in space like shattered husks. The Legacy floated in the aftermath, its systems battered but intact. Riggs stood at the front of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the remains of the alien fleet. They had done it. They had won. "We did it," Steele said, his voice barely a whisper, but there was a note of disbelief in it. Riggs turned to Voss, who was slumped over in her seat, exhausted but alive. "You did it." Voss managed a faint smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "We all did." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Riggs allowed herself a moment of peace. The war wasn't over, but they had dealt the aliens a blow they would never recover from. Humanity had taken back its future. And, in that moment, Riggs realized that the real victory wasn't just the destruction of the alien invaders, it was the proof that humanity could adapt, evolve, and rise above any challenge. Even against the darkest odds, the spirit of humanity would never be broken. As the Legacy sailed through the void, the crew stood united, knowing that their fight wasn't finished. The universe had been forever changed by their actions, and now, humanity would take its place as a force to be reckoned with.